approached. By the time they returned to England, they had a new name. They were Led Zeppelin. Hey, girl, I got something you ought to know. The newborn Led Zeppelin strategy was to build a reputation by intensive touring. In October of 1968, they headed into the studio to capture their live show on record. Their debut album was recorded in just 3 weeks. Most of the songs were intense and bluesy, like the stuff Jimmy had played with the Yardbirds. But there were also unusual choices, like the Indian-influenced Black Mountain Side and a song popularized by Joan Baez, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. The sound was something new, an incredibly dynamic hard rock. Later it would be called heavy metal, but Zeppelin was always bigger than that. The group played in England while their manager, Peter Grant, headed off to the States to secure a record deal. CBS, the Yardbirds label, claimed they had the rights to the band, but Grant outmaneuvered them. Jimmy Page had never signed the Yardbirds recording contract. Grant wanted Zeppelin to be on Atlantic, home of Cream and Aretha Franklin. Grant returned with one of the most lucrative deals ever negotiated for an unknown band. Atlantic Records had signed Led Zeppelin, giving them a huge advance and royalty rate along with complete artistic control. With a mix of apprehension and excitement, Led Zeppelin headed off to America on Christmas Eve, 1968, leaving behind their loved ones for the holidays. They were nervous about how they'd go over in the States, where the Yardbirds had never really broken through. When Zeppelin arrived in America, Page and Jones were already seasoned veterans in the music business. But for 19-year-olds Robert Plant and John Bonham, America was an eye-opener. Compared to the frozen British Midlands back home, L.A. was the land of milk and honey. Zeppelin soaked up the sunshine and experienced the groupie scene for the first time.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Led Zeppelin.
The band made their U.S. debut on December 26, 1968, in Denver. Touring with Vanilla Fudge, Zeppelin were not even mentioned on the bill. In January 1969, their debut album was released. It was panned by Rolling Stone. A female reporter from Life magazine came out to do a feature on Zeppelin, but it was killed after she said she was attacked by 2 band members. She compared Led Zeppelin to animals in a zoo. That set up a pattern. The critics hated Led Zeppelin, but the band's growing fan base was intensely loyal. They played high-profile underground venues like the Fillmore and Boston Tea Party. The audience loved them.
When we got to America, made this date in San Francisco to spread like wildfire.
FM rock radio was on the rise, and by May, the first album pushed its way to the top 10. In the spring of 1969, Zeppelin toured Scandinavia, where they performed on Danish TV.
When we got there, they said, there's a very important person we want you to meet. Looking forward to meeting you. She made a point of coming to the studio to see it. And it was Baroness von Zeppelin. And well, she was so overjoyed that we'd used the family name and the rest of it, you know, pleasantries. And they took her out into the studio to show her around, you see, and suddenly she saw the album cover, first album cover, which is of the Zeppelin Passionate Face. There was almighty shrieking and she came back in and threatening to have the lawyers stop the show. And all of this was going on right to the point of transmission.
During the rest of 1969, the group toured the U.S. extensively, fortifying their reputation as one of the best rock bands around. get the time, Zeppelin would head into the studio to cut a few tracks for their second album. Because it was made during their days off from touring, Led Zeppelin 2 packed the energy release of a live show. It contained Whole Lotta Love, released as a U.S. single. It became the only Zepp tune to crack the top 10.
It was quite a revolutionary turn-on, if you like. There was so many sexual connotations in the song, so much pop, and the beginnings of pomp.
You need cooling, baby, I'm not fooling. I'm gonna send you back to schooling.
With Whole Lotta Love all over American radio, Zeppelin 2 became the group's first #1 album. It knocked the Beatles' Abbey Road off the top of the charts. In the months that followed, the Beatles broke up, and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison died. Rock and roll was left with a huge void. Led Zeppelin was ready to fill it. In the spring of 1970, Led Zeppelin would burn out from 2.5 years of continuous touring. They decided to leave the road and take a rest. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant retreated to the Welsh mountains. They lived in a small cottage called Brawny Oar, where they began to work on material for their third album. It was the first time I really came to know Robert, Jimmy Page said. Plant and Page were both fans of Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Led Zeppelin 3 revealed the acoustic side of the band.
Led Zeppelin 3 was not one of the best sellers in the Led Zeppelin catalogue because the audience turned around and said, well, what are we supposed to do with this? Where's all our Whole Lotta Love part 2, 3, 4, and 5?
When she gets some silver, she get a little gold. What did you bring me, my dear friend?
Expanded their live show to include an acoustic set. Zeppelin was now headlining arenas. The band held a press conference to mark their earning an unprecedented $100,000 for 2 shows at New York's Madison Square Garden. Offstage, the press found Robert was the most amiable. At times, he could be shy and sensitive. He was particularly affected by the violence that was beginning to surround Zeppelin's concerts. At the shows, whether by Peter Grant's own team or rowdy fans or security guards, somebody always seemed to get hurt.
The whole idea of music from the beginning of time was for people to, be happy and to enjoy themselves the best they can. Unfortunately, in a lot of places that we've gone to, trying to, sort of convey a little of that sort of feeling, the audiences have got the message, stood up to applaud, and got banged on the head.